what is up you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and today I thought we would dive into something a little bit more spooky. I'm going to start a sort of supernatural, unsolved kind of segment to this channel. I have a few ideas running through about what I could do, but the first one I did want to dive into is something that I find really incredible and really sort of weird, and that is the case of Mary Reeser. Now, Mary Reeser was an elderly lady when this happened to her, and before we start, I do want to dive in to more about our victim, poor Mary, and kind of her life before all of this happened. There isn't a lot of information, as she was just a lady. She wasn't anyone famous, and she wasn't anyone well known until this case happened. And so I have a little bit about her, which is probably things you'd find from the birth and death records, as it's her birthday, it's her marriage, and the birth of her son Richard. So, without further ado, let's dive into the case of Mary Reeser. Mary Reeser was born in Columbia, Pennsylvania in 1884 and married her husband, Richard Reeser, who was about 9 or 10 years older than her. Her son, Richard Jr., was born in 1910 in Pennsylvania as well. Now that is all of the information I have about Mary before this case happened. So let's dive in to the creepy case of Mary Reeser, shall we? Mary Reeser was a 67-year-old widow living in an apartment building in Florida. She was last seen alive on July 1st, 1951. At about 9 p.m., her son and her landlord, Mrs. Pansy Carpenter, said goodnight to her and left her alone in her room in her lounge chair. Now, this was nothing out of the ordinary. They would do this most nights and she would be fine. But something weird happened that evening. At about 5 a.m. in the morning of July 2nd, Mrs. Carpenter was awoken with the smell of smoke, and she just thought that it would be the water pipe that overheated. This happened very often, so she went down and turned it off. A little later that morning, at about 9 a.m, she answered the door to a telegraph boy who had a telegraph for Mary Reeser. So she went down to give the telegram to Mary, and she knocked on the door. However, there was no answer. Mrs. Carpenter was a little worried, as she would normally answer the door. Mary wouldn't really get out, and it was quite early in the morning. So she went for the door handle to try and open the door, and the handle was boiling hot. A couple of painters that were working across the road noticed that Mrs. Carpenter was trying to get inside, and noticed that she was a little bit distressed. So they came over and helped her pry open the door. They forced down the door and went inside, and what they discovered was something very strange. In the corner of the apartment, they found the remains of Miss Mary Reeser. The entire corner of the apartment was burned, and the chair she was sat on was also burnt. So it seems that Mary did not leave her chair when her son and her landlord said goodnight to her the evening before. The rest of the house was fine. There was no burn marks, there was no ash marks. It was very odd. The only part of the apartment that was on fire was the corner where the chair was. All that was left of the chair was the springs. You couldn't see any of the fabric or any of the lining or any of the padding. A 170-pound woman, that was Mary Reeser, was reduced to about 10 pounds of ash. Also in the charred area was Mary's foot that was perfectly fine. There was no burn marks to her foot. Her foot was removed just above the ankle, and her stocking and slipper were still intact. Also, Mary's skull was found on the floor, and it was reduced to the size of a teacup, which is very, very weird. It's random parts of her body were left unburned, unharmed, and the rest of the house was absolutely fine except this one corner. Now, what could have happened? And that's what we're going to dive into now. There are a few theories of what could have happened, but let's get into them. So when experts arrived at the scene, they said that a fire of about 2,500 degrees was needed to burn a body the way that Mary's was burnt. The rest of the room, even though undamaged by the fire, had signs of heat damage. So there was unburned wicks of candles that were just laying in a puddle of wax. There was also sort of grease and heat damage to the walls, and things such as plug sockets were melted. Her clock was also heat damaged, which the clock was stopped at about 4:20 a.m., which is probably when the fire occurred that morning. The first theory on what happened to Mary is pretty normal, kind of makes sense, but there is a lot of inconsistencies. So the first theory is because Mary took sleeping pills to help her sleep. She ended up taking her pills that evening and then lit up a cigarette, and they suspect that she fell asleep while her cigarette was still alight, and the lit cigarette set her chair on fire. So even though this theory sounds very reasonable, there are some issues with it. The first thing is that a fire to cremate a body needs to be about 2,500 degrees, and a fire made from a cigarette would not get that hot. So it would be impossible for Mary's body to just cremate the way it did. When a body does cremate, it needs about 3 to 4 hours in that high of a temperature. So another issue with this theory is that the rest of the building was not affected. If the fire was that hot and would need to burn for 3 to 4 hours, how did it not spread to the rest of the room or to even the rest of the building? So that kind of debunks that theory a little bit. Another part of this theory that is wrong is the mattress company that sold the chair that Mary used. They said that the lining and the stuffing in that chair was non-flammable. They said that the stuffing and the padding would only smoulder and then go out. It would not set alight. So if Mary did drop her cigarette on her chair, how would it have set on fire? How would it have gone into that big of a fire that there was only the spring coils left when it is non-flammable? So that again doesn't really add up to what happened to Mary. So another theory that came from this is a little weird. The detective on the case actually received a letter for someone who said they saw what happened that night. They said that they saw a ball of fire go through Mary's window, which would then set poor Mary on fire, which doesn't really make sense. Like, where did this fire come from? Why did it fly through Mary's window? Who sent the fire? Was it somebody throwing like a kind of fiery object through Mary's window, or did the fire just come through the window like some kind of magic? And yeah, again, why didn't the fire spread if it was just normal fire? the spreading part of this doesn't really make sense, and also why would it be of 2,500 degrees hot? That part doesn't really make sense. The next theory is that it could be something paranormal. People have said that because of Mary's shrunken skull, that it comes from something paranormal, that a demon got inside and killed poor Mary, and that's why her head was shrunk to the size of a teacup. It could also be something satanic, some kind of ritual, or that it was something to do with the undead, or something magic or dark magic related. But people are a little bit skeptical about this because some people have said that even though the skull looked like a skull, it could have also been a part of Mary's spine, which would have, kind of matched the size. Kind of part of the spine is about the size of a teacup, so that would make more sense. And also, when you are cremated, your skull actually explodes from the heat and the pressure, so if her body went to 2,500 degrees, her skull probably would have just exploded and would not have shrunk. That has never been documented. No one has ever seen fire shrink a skull before. The last theory is the theory I believe the most, even though it seems way out there and kind of, not believable, and it seems way too far-fetched, is spontaneous human combustion. Now, there is a lot of theories about spontaneous human combustion. It has been documented, there has been multiple cases, but people still can't explain it properly. So I have a few facts about spontaneous human combustion, and I'll let you guys make up your mind, and you can tell me what you think happened to poor Mary. So what spontaneous human combustion means is that the body has been set alight without any evidence of an external flame or an external spark causing the body to set alight. So there are a few reported cases, and there are also some characteristics in people that the cases that have been seen, they've been able to say common sort of characteristics between them to kind of try and prove that spontaneous human combustion is a thing. So let's dive into the characteristics of people that have suffered spontaneous human combustion. I have a list here of the things that scientists and medical professionals have seen when spontaneous human combustion has occurred. And the first thing is that the victims are usually alcoholics. Now, this may have something to do with the high level of alcohol in the body. Everybody knows that alcohol is flammable, so maybe that would have something to do with how the body sets alight. The other thing they have seen is that they are usually elderly females. I don't know what, this has to do with spontaneous human combustion. Is it because females are just so much hotter than men? Maybe, I don't know. Women do seem to get hotter and feel heat more, so maybe that has something to do with it. I'm not too sure. They've also said that it is very common for hands or feet to fall off because of the heat, and that is what happened to Mary. Her foot was left on the floor with her foot and stocking still intact. They've also said that the rest of the room never gets affected by the heat. Well, it gets affected by the heat, but it doesn't get affected by the fire. So there is heat damage to like melted candles, melted sockets, and kind of the greasy sort of charred sort of look, but there is no fire damage, which again can be seen in Mary's case. And also there's usually a foul odour of some kind, but obviously that wasn't recorded in Mary's case, so I'm not too sure if she had the odour or the kind of disgusting sort of smell to be the room, or what the smell could even be. Probably burnt flesh, I would assume, but Who knows, it could smell like anything. I have found 4 other cases of spontaneous human combustion around the world. And the first case was a 89-year-old woman called Margaret Hogan. She lived alone in Prussia Street in Dublin. Her body was found pretty much unrecognisable to the point of complete destruction in 1970, and there was no other signs of a fire. It was only, like Mary, she was alone in the house. Only one part of the room was affected by the fire, and it was that hot that it completely destroyed her body. The next case is Henry Thomas, who is 73 years old. He lived alone in a council estate in South Wales, where he burned to death in his living room. His entire body was almost destroyed, other than his leg and his skull, which is very similar to Mary's case. In December 2010 is the next case of a man spontaneously human combusting. In December 2010, a 76-year-old man called Michael Faherty was burnt alive in his house in the county of Galway in Ireland. His death was actually recorded as spontaneous combustion by the coroner, as there was no other evidence to why Michael died. The final case was in September 2010. Now, John Nolan was a 70-year-old pensioner from County Mayo in Ireland when he was walking down the street in Tottenham, North London, and he spontaneously set alight. Passers-by did try and put John out, however, he did eventually succumb to his injuries after he was airlifted to hospital. He suffered third-degree burns to 65% of his body. Again, there was no evidence of flames on the street or a fire where he could have stepped into it and then set alight. He just spontaneously set alight, and that is why he was also put down as spontaneous combustion on his death certificate. Now, there is some science behind it, and people have kind of made some sort of theories as to why spontaneous human combustion happens. And the first one is ketosis. Brian J. Ford has said that ketosis could set the body alight when alcohol and a low-carb diet mix together, and it causes acetone to form in the body. This is a very, very flammable substance and could lead to human combustion. However, there's not a reason why the fire would just set. It's just that your body produces acetone, and it would then lead to your body setting on fire. I'm actually going to have to read this one because it's very long and has a lot of long words, so we'll see how well we understand this together. It doesn't look like it would be too difficult, but we shall see. A mast cell researcher called Lawrence Afrin says that a rare condition called mast cell activation syndrome could be the cause of combustion in humans. He says that the syndrome causes mast cells to spontaneously release over 200 inflammatory molecules known as mediators, including the substance neropinephrine. I don't know what that is. He says that the case report of a man with this syndrome who grew ill appeared to smoke in the presence of several witnesses, which could, link to combustion, where there's smoke there's usually a fire sort of thing. It's a bit weird that people saw someone literally just start smoking for no reason. Afrin writes that the release of large amounts of norepinephrine or another mast cell substance could turn on regulatory protein called UCP1 in greater than normal amounts. Now, UCP1 causes adipose oxidation, which releases heat. So maybe the mix of them could kind of set the body alight from the inside, which I assume is what he's going to say here. He said that the mix of these two chemicals could generate heat in excess of 90 degrees Celsius, which, saying that Mary must have burnt at about 2,500 degrees, you know, it's a bit lower than that amount, but maybe it could go higher, and that's why not everybody dies from it, and it could be a rare case of it reaching that level of heat. Who knows? An author called Larry E. Arnold did say that there is a particle inside the body called pyroton, which, going by its name, could possibly mean that it could set alight, and that a mix with alcohol in the blood, which is flammable, could cause somebody to set alight. Not quite sure. You know, I enjoy a good drink and I haven't set on fire yet, but maybe it is how much alcohol you have in your system, and that's why it's mostly alcoholics that do have issues with spontaneous human combustion. Another author called Michael Harrison has also come up with a theory that has to do with poltergeists, which I find very interesting. Spelling a demon, I'm sorry. He said that he has been connected to a poltergeist that can cause this. He has said that the force which activates the poltergeist originates in and is supplied by a human being, and he says that spontaneous human combustion has to do with the poltergeist phenomena. There's not much evidence there, but it is another sort of evidence. Maybe that's where the ball of light or the ball of fire came from, and it could be a poltergeist coming in to ruin Mary's day. Who knows? Someone else has also explained the ball of light and the ball of fire theory. A man called John Abrahamson suggested that the ball of lightning could account to spontaneous human combustion. So instead of it being a bolt of lightning, that it is a ball, and it goes to people, and the heat from the lightning would then cause the body to combust. He has said that the ball of lightning theory has happened before, and it's very rare, and it's happened on Earth a few times and has been undocumented. But it is very rare, and is it likely that Mary would have been hit by a ball of lightning? People have said that the ball of lightning is smaller than a pea. Is that enough to set an entire body on fire? Who knows? But unfortunately, the case of Mary Reeser is still unsolved, and no one really knows what happened to her. It is a very odd case, and it is something that we don't really hear about, which is why I like it so much. It is something completely different to murder and to different types of crimes. It is something that is pretty much unexplainable. Anyway, that is the end of today's episode. I hope you guys really enjoyed the story of Mary Reeser as much as I do. I think it's very fascinating and is really up for discussion, so please leave in the comments what you think happened to Mary, and I will see you guys in the next video. Until then, bye!